Chapter 16. Jay leaned forward and put his head over his knees. His entire body was shaking from the aftereffects of the adrenaline rush, and he was finding it hard to calm down. Lexie leaned against him as she struggled to do the same. The 5-minute drive had done little to stabilize their bodies. "That was easily the scariest thing that has ever happened to me," Jay commented in a deadpan voice, hoping to lighten the mood. "Definitely," Lexie let out before she began to laugh somewhat hysterically. Jay felt his own hysteria threatening to surface and ruthlessly pushed it back down before they made a huge scene. People were already looking at them strangely, and they couldn't afford to be noticed right now. His legs were still shaking as he stood, pulling Lexie with him. Shocked by the suddenness of his actions, she stopped laughing momentarily, and then entirely when she remembered where they were. "Sorry about that. I lost it for a minute there," she apologized as they resumed walking into the shopping center. "It's fine. It actually stopped me from losing it myself. So thank you for that. Besides, I think panic is the natural reaction when someone has just held a gun on you. I'm actually surprised that we managed to put it off for as long as we did," Jay reasoned, not wanting to make a big deal out of it. She really had kept him from panicking by doing it first, and he was not sure that he would have been able to stop as easily as she seemed to. "Do you think they are actually a part of some French government agency, like Grandpa believes?" Lexie asked, changing the topic suddenly as the thought occurred to her. "Honestly, I don't know. It's not like he bothered to say anything this time before pulling the gun on us. All we really know about him is that he speaks English with a slight accent and carries a gun with a silencer attached," Jay inferred as people passed by on either side of them, never paying them a second glance. "Of course, having said that," he continued, "I think it is probably better that we assume it's true. We made the assumption yesterday that your grandpa was just being overly suspicious, and look at what just happened. Not that I think we could have prevented it, either way." "You're right. It's probably better if we just assume that he's right about everything for now," Lexie agreed. Jay stopped in front of a store that had mannequins wearing both men's and women's clothing. "How about this place? It seems to carry clothes for both of us." "It should be fine," she responded, eyeing the clothes that they were currently wearing. "Although I think we'll need to find a different store for the backpacks." "Well, either way, we can carry everything in shopping bags until then. For now, let's just worry about finding different clothes to wear." Jay led the way into the store, his fingers brushing across the different materials. They took their time shopping now that they were off the street and hopefully away from prying eyes. Both had enough cash to buy a couple of new outfits with some leftover. They still needed to worry about how much they could carry in backpacks without them bulging obscenely. The idea was to not make it obvious what they had in them. They chose outfits to wear out of the store, with both making sure to pay close attention that they were different from anything that they had worn on their trip thus far. Finding an extra top and jacket for each of them took a little more time. Putting everything in a pile on top of the checkout counter, they moved the clothes that they would wear out of the store to the side. Paying with cash and holding the clothes they planned on changing into over their arms, they went into the changing rooms. Stepping back out, they stuffed the clothes they had just taken off into the shopping bags with the rest of their new clothes. What they were wearing now blended in with the people around them, making them less noticeable. They were just another face in the crowd, for now at least. They would not stay that way for long if they had to continue carrying their bulging sack of clothes with them. Stepping back onto the street, they followed the line of shops until they found one that carried backpacks. Now with their clothes safely divided between two backpacks and out of sight, the only thing that they needed was some hats, which they found at a street stall as they were leaving the shopping center. "We still have a few hours before we should go to the bank. What do you want to do until then?" Jay asked Lexie as he settled the cap firmly on his head, pulling the brim low to hide his eyes. "I don't know about you, but I'm starving. We've been running and walking all day so far, and breakfast was an awfully long time ago," Lexie complained, half-jokingly, holding her stomach with a grimace. Laughing at her actions, Jay led them away from the shopping crowd. "Let's find a place to eat then. I'm sure there must be some really good places around here. It's France after all." "Ooh, that's right. In that case, shall we do some sightseeing afterward as well? I mean, with it apparently being France and all that," Lexie said snarkily, a smirk engulfing her face. "Laugh it up while you can," he chuckled, bumping his hip against hers and accidentally throwing her off balance. Throwing out her arms, she snagged a hand on his backpack and held on as she stumbled. "Jerk, be careful," she bit out as she regained her balance. "Sorry about that. I didn't mean to bump into you that hard." He was struggling not to laugh as he apologized. Lexie grumbled under her breath as they resumed walking. "Well, now we are definitely going sightseeing after we eat. Even if it is just us walking around seeing Versailles as we do it. It's only too bad that we had to take apart our phones. We won't be able to take any pictures to remember it by." "Yeah, you're right. This is definitely going to be something that I wouldn't mind remembering later on. Assuming, of course, that we survive, that is," Jay added, stupidly killing the happy mood that had arisen. They had managed to forget that they were being chased for a brief time, and then he had to go and remind them. Stupid mouth, he cursed himself silently. Why did he have to go and remind her and himself in the process that they were in danger? They had been having a good time, relaxing, then he had to go and open his stupid fat mouth. Lexie sighed. "Thanks for that, Jay. I really needed the reminder that we are in danger." Her voice dripped heavily with sarcasm. "I know, sorry. It slipped out before I even knew what my mouth was saying." It was the truth, but it was still a lame explanation as far as both of them were concerned. Back to our previous topic, though. Do you think we could find some old-school disposable cameras to use? Wow, I had forgotten that those were even once a thing. I haven't seen one of them in years. For that matter, I don't think I've even seen a proper film. She waved her hand in the air, searching for the right word. Developing center, Jay guessed. She shrugged and smiled slyly. Sure, if we're just going to make up fake names for places, then that works. Anyway, I don't think I've even seen one of those outside of a Walgreens in forever. Well, that's an option, at least for if we see someone selling those cameras. There was a restaurant set into the wall in front of them as they were talking. It appeared to be a small place like they had wanted. They stopped their bickering and chatting and entered the restaurant. Inside were two older people sitting at one of the tables. They stood from their table as Jay and Lexie entered, greeting them in their French language. Sorry, we don't speak French yet, Lexie told them sadly as they stood in the entryway. There was no reply back as they stood before them. The couple pulled out 2 chairs for them to sit on and handed them a pair of menus. They worked in perfect harmony with each other. They had not even had to talk or look at one another before they were working together. Oh, the menus are written in English and French, Lexie exclaimed in surprise as they allowed themselves to be seated. The food was delicious and occupied their entire focus as they ate their way through the meal, and then dessert. Food was stolen from each of their plates as they tried what the other had ordered repeatedly. They leaned back in their chairs and patted their full stomachs with contented pleasure. Smiling at their reactions, the elderly lady that had been serving them brought over their check. After paying, they left the restaurant and stood in the sunlight, taking a moment to stretch and indulge in the rare feeling of utter contentment that people always imagined came with traveling to new places, but rarely did. In their case, it had more to do with the company than anything else. That was really good food. Much better than I would have expected for such a small shop, Jay commented as they walked down the sidewalk, continuing in the same direction as before. It really was. I even wrote down the names of the food, so we could try it again. I also wrote down the name of the restaurant and its location, so we can come again next time. Lexie was smiling as they walked. The delicious food had put both of them in a better mood, having driven their dark thoughts to the far recesses of their mind. Well, we have a few more hours that we need to occupy. Where do you want to go? Is there anything around here that you want to see specifically? The question hung in the air between them as Jay looked at Lexie. I wouldn't mind seeing the castle, but I don't think that would be a good idea right now. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about Versailles as a town. We can always follow the rest of the tourists and just go where they go. She asked, wondering if that was all right. If you are fine with that, then I don't mind. You're probably right about us needing to avoid the castle for now. So really, that only leaves us with wandering around on our own, possibly getting lost as a result. He smiled at the possibility, knowing that a taxi would be able to take them anywhere they needed, since they were plentiful. Or we can play the sheep and follow everyone else and gawk at everything in wonder, just like them. Don't be mean. Lexie chuckled. I'm sure the regular tourists aren't that bad. Besides, I wouldn't describe them as sheep. Sheep have a herd mentality. I would describe them more as mindless zombies. A wide smile caused the corners of her eyes to crinkle as she finished. That is a hard one. Let's see, on the one hand, we have the herd people who merely follow the person in front of them like we are suggesting doing. Then on the other hand, we have the people who wander everywhere with glassy-eyed stares, not enjoying anything in a blind, mindless devotion to their inner ennui. Does that sound about right? Jay questioned as they attached themselves to the rear end of a group of tourists. Ennui, really? Who uses that word anymore? Lexie was still smiling widely, her good mood deciding to stay around for now. It's a perfectly good word. It means? Jay began to defend his word choice before being cut off by Lexie. I know what it means. I'm commenting more on it being a word that you no longer hear anymore. Especially from people our age. Maybe you have an old soul. Lexie laughed lightly as she spoke. I have an old soul. Jay gasped mockingly. You have an old soul. I'm going to start calling you Grandma Lexie from now on. Their silly banter drew the attention of several tourists ahead of them. Smiling at the staring people in front of them, they quieted until they turned away. Sharing a look afterward, their lips thinned as they nearly started laughing again at each other's reactions. For the next few hours, they followed one group and then another as they walked all over portions of the city. They always changed groups when one appeared to be heading to a bus or other form of transport, as they wanted to walk through the city themselves. They learned more than they thought they would by following the faceless people on their respective journeys. Many of them had even guidebooks of one persuasion or another. Facts and assumptions fell liberally from the mouths of the various guides as well as the tourists as they walked. They learned that much of Paris had been built by no less than 3 different secret organizations, including the Illuminati. All controlled behind the scenes, of course. It was impossible to tell if the people that surrounded them actually believed the drivel they were spouting, or if they were merely parroting what they had read or heard somewhere else and wanted to appear knowledgeable. Regardless, they took anything and everything they heard with a grain of salt, and promptly forgot it when they moved to another group. It was enjoyable, and they found themselves laughing near constantly at what the people were saying, and sometimes at the people themselves. The reactions to their constant state of uproarious glee only made it worse, and several times they found themselves having to leave a group early because they were simply laughing too hard to keep following them. It was the absolute best day that they could have planned, and more than anything else. It pushed everything that had happened to them and the reason for their visit to the very back of their minds. For a time at least, they were able to pretend that they were regular tourists and just enjoy themselves. The length of the shadows around them lengthened and changed as the day went on until they could put off going to the bank no longer. Thankfully, they had passed several international banking institutions throughout their day spent wandering the city. It was only a matter of picking the one that was closest to their current position and walking in. They should be able to withdraw a small amount of money through an ATM. If they wanted more normally, they would just go inside and talk to one of the tellers. At least that was how it worked back home when they went into a bank that was affiliated with their own. They didn't think that was the way it worked overseas. We're probably not going to be able to withdraw any money inside. So why did your grandpa tell us to go to an international bank? Jay asked, somewhat annoyed as they stood outside a rather large bank. I don't know. Maybe there is more that he just forgot to tell us. He probably wanted us to go to a specific one that was affiliated with our bank back home. Or maybe their ATMs are special in some way, I don't know. She stamped her foot in frustration. Either way, all we can do is just try the ATM. We'll withdraw the maximum for now and leave as quickly as possible. Lexie replied, just as confused as he was. Fine, I'm more worried about the ATM cameras than I am about them tracking our card or account activity that quickly. That'll change after we do this, though. They'll be monitoring both from here on out, if they aren't already. Jay explained as he stood to the side of the ATM. Pulling the brim of his cap lower and leaving his backpack with Lexie, he stepped up to the ATM and into the field of vision of its camera. Slipping his card into the machine, it found his bank information without an issue. He quickly punched in the required information and selected the maximum amount that was allowed daily. Taking the money that it spat out and grabbing his card, he spun around and walked off to the side of the machine once more. Your turn, Jay suggested to Lexie as he took his bag and then hers in turn. Watching as she did the same things that he had done, he felt his heart rate increase as he turned his attention to the sidewalk. Nobody stood out to his untrained eyes. They all appeared to be normal, everyday people. Some were probably heading home from a long day of work, and others to friends or restaurants. That he could not tell if they were normal or not was causing his adrenaline to spike. His imagination beginning to conjure up one scenario after the other, each worse than the last. Lexie rejoined Jay, and taking her bag from him in one hand, she rested her other hand on his bicep and squeezed. Calm down, Jay, you look like you are freaking out for some reason. Did you see something, or is it something else? Lexie questioned, as she pushed him away from the ATM and into a dark corner of the building. No, I didn't see anything. I just realized that I probably wouldn't, anyway. We're not trained to spot the kind of people that we think they are. They, however, are trained to hide from us. I just started to think about it and started hyperventilating. Sorry. Jay squeezed everything out as he brought himself under control. I'll be fine. Right now we need to be moving away from here. Dusk is only a little way off. We should be fine with heading to the address they gave us now, Jay declared as he pulled them from the darkened corner back onto the sidewalk. Let's walk for a bit before finding a taxi. I think we should be farther away from the bank when we do. It might make it a little more difficult for them to know where we are going if they aren't there already. Lexie added as she took the lead and moved to the front. Jay followed along as she led. 3 streets and an alley later, they waved down a taxi and pulled out the papers they had been given. Using their broken French that they had been practicing throughout the day, they asked the driver to take them to the address that was highlighted on the paper. It was a rather long drive to the outer edge of the city, where there were more houses than apartments. Constant construction surrounded them as the old houses were torn down to make way for apartment complexes. The taxi turned onto the street they needed and pulled over when Lexie asked him to stop, pointing to the sidewalk as she did so. He pointed out a lot that was currently under construction on their right, farther down the road. Apparently, the house where she had lived as a baby had indeed been torn down, if any of it had survived the fire to begin with. There did not appear to be anyone around. The failing light of dusk prevented them from getting a good look, same as it did anyone trying to see them properly. They looked at the houses before choosing one that looked a little more rundown than the rest. The house was still in good shape, but it could use a fresh coat of paint, whereas its yard and garden were immaculate and obviously taken care of with love. Hoping that the people who lived in that house were older and long-time residents of the area, they walked up the path and knocked on the door, not seeing a doorbell.